everyone, and welcome to today's session. My name is Madeline, and I am the president of PreMedCC, a student-run organization created in the fall of 2021. Our goal as an organization was to create an online program for pre-medical students at community colleges and universities with the hope of guiding the next generation of diverse and inclusive physicians. We know how challenging finding guidance and mentorship can be, especially in the middle of a global pandemic. And while we advertise our organization as being for community college students, our events are open to everyone. We realize that finding guidance and mentorship in a pre-med journey can be especially challenging for first-generation students, people that lack financial resources, or just those that don't know anyone in the medical field. One of the best parts about our events is that they're virtual, so you can do them from the comfort of your own home or wherever you are. We typically have events on most Fridays from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, and on Saturdays from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. If you aren't able to attend an event, all of our sessions are posted on our YouTube channel. Many of our sessions will end with a Q&A with our speaker, and any questions that you have can be put in the Q&A section on Zoom, and our team members will read them aloud and have them answered. After you have attended our event, you can log onto our website and complete the quiz, which will contain questions pertaining to today's session. If you score 70% or higher on the quiz, you will be awarded a certificate to show that you have attended our session today. And if you want to stay connected with our upcoming events or tell your pre-med friends that are struggling to find mentorship about PreMedCC, our social media accounts are all at PreMedCC. Thank you. I'm going to pass it on to Lucia, who will introduce our speaker for today.
Thank you, Madeline. And so to introduce our speaker, Joshua Abolarin is a first-year general surgery resident at the University of Texas Southwestern. He took a longer path to medicine after a 6-year career in the United States Navy, where he worked as a self-defense weapons technician. While serving in the military, he realized his strong passion for science and working with the community and decided to pursue medicine. He started his educational journey at Diablo Valley College and transferred to the University of California, Davis, and had the opportunity to work in the UCDavis pre-medical surgical internship program, where he discovered his passion for surgery. He graduated with a double major in neurobiology, physiology and behavior, and psychology, and then attended the University of Colorado School of Medicine. Now he is enjoying his intern year at UT Southwestern and is developing his skills with the hope of pursuing trauma surgery. So thank you very much for joining us today, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and thank you very much for the introduction. I think it's absolutely wonderful that this resource is available. I know that I felt a little bit like out in the desert, if you will, going into community college as an older student and knowing that I wanted to do medicine, but feeling like a lot of the resources weren't available at the time.
And if you had something that you wanted to share your screen, I believe you should be able to do that. Or if not, then you can go ahead with
that story. Sure. Unfortunately, I didn't bring slides for y'all, but I can talk a little bit about my circuitous path into medicine. My mom was a registered nurse for over 30 years. And when I was a kid, we had the special go to your parents' work day or whatever it was called. And I remember going to hospital with her and thinking that it was interesting what she did, but I didn't want to do it because they had me sit by the computer where patients could press the button and ask for the nurse. And they all sounded like they were in pain. And I was really concerned about that. And after that experience, I told my mom I was not really interested in doing medicine. And initially when I went to college, I wasn't really sure. I was thinking about science, but had no interest in pursuing medicine. And then when I went into the military, that's kind of where I discovered what I enjoy in a job or in a career. I worked as a fire controlman, which is basically an electronics weapons technician. And I spent a lot of my time working with my hands, and I realized how much joy I have working with my hands. I also started reading textbooks while I was out to sea and things like that, and started missing science and how the human body works and things like that. And I also did some volunteer work, which gave me the opportunity to work in the ER at the VA in Washington. I also worked in a few Joshua homes in San Diego. And I just fell in love with being able to actually work in the community again, and to help people in a way that I felt was best fitting of my pursuits. When I initially went into community college, I just knew I wanted to be a doctor. Wasn't really sure what type. And while I was searching for programs, that's when I found out about the pre-med surgical internship program that Juven had established. And I became super fascinated by it. I was wondering what surgeons do. The only thing I had as a reference was Grey's Anatomy, which I can now confirm is not as accurate to the real thing, but it's a great show. And I had the opportunity to actually experience what it was like to see surgeons practice. And that's where I knew that it was combining not only my passion for science, but also the things that I enjoy with working with my hands, with being able to have an opportunity to kind of change or be a part of the change in the field. And so that's kind of what stimulated my pursuit. And it maintained, I maintained my passion for surgery throughout undergrad and into medical school. They always tell you to keep a broad perspective, especially during third year when you're rotating through different specialties. And I did. I loved a lot of specialties. I really enjoyed peds. I enjoyed OB-GYN. But I always kept coming back to seeing surgeons coming to the room when I was in like medicine or something like that. And they would take the patients and I would be like, what are they going to do in the operating room? And so my heart was always there. And now I'm here.
What did you do to study for the Mcat?
The Mcat. That was a while ago. But I do remember, I think it had just changed to the newer format. And so I ended up taking the time during my summer while I was still attending classes, but it was the best time I had to be able to study for it. And back then, what I did was I did a bunch of questions. And I can tell you right now, you're going to be doing that throughout your medical career. So the answer to doing well on the Mcat, doing well on the USMLE, which is the exams that you take during medical school and in the beginning of residency, and then your board exams will always be answering as many questions as possible. There are great resources on YouTube. There are great courses. There are great textbooks to read. But ultimately, doing questions is the best way to do well on the exam. And I think one person explained it best. He said that if you do 20,000 questions, he was talking about the USMLE. He said there's no way they can ask you a question that you've never seen before, and it's very true. So I would say doing questions was what helped me. There were a few resources that I didn't realize they had back then, as far as Anki and flashcards, which I found out about when I got into medical school and started using that. And that really depends on the type of person you are. Some people hate flashcards, and I don't blame them. But flashcards were the best way to kind of keep my memory of what I had learned from questions or from lectures retained. And so, yeah, whatever system you choose, have a way to have a recall quite often. Just to make sure that you remember everything you've learned. Nothing's worse than getting to the exam and seeing something that you knew, but you didn't recall it early enough to remember it. So.
Talk about how you studied at community college to be successful.
So I was at Diablo Valley College, and I'm so grateful for my friends who I met there and I'm still friends with today. I think having that group of friends that you study with was the best way for me at the time. Whenever we'd have our study group sessions, obviously you had to be careful of not kind of going into life topics and just not getting any studying done. But when we would study, it would be about teaching each other how we learned a certain concept or why we got a certain question right that others were struggling with. Because I've learned more and more that sometimes the best teachers are fellow students, just because they're at a similar level and they're able to provide the information at a level that's much more understandable sometimes. And that's also why I enjoyed using YouTube a lot, because YouTube, you had a lot of students who also decided to make vlogs where they would be able to explain certain difficult concepts, whether it was in general chemistry, general biology that I didn't understand. And I would use a ton of those resources as well. But groups was the best way. If you start teaching other people how to do certain concepts, it sticks better and it helps you see where you haven't really learned a concept very well.
What about when you went from JC to UCDavis?
That was a huge change. I remember my first class at Diablo, I think it was about 20 something students. And then my first class at UCDavis was like 500 or something like that. And so it was a big adjustment. I think, again, what I tried to do was get into programs that were available for pre-med students, like MAPS, SNMA, being involved in that. I also took part in some of the clinics that they have. UCDavis has like 7 different clinics that are available for pre-med students to volunteer at. And I had the opportunity to take part in that. And those communities are very close. We would meet each week and we would, do things that just made us a little bit more cohesive as a group. And the way we would treat our clinic was as if it was our own. We would take ownership of patients. We'd talk about patient outcomes. We would look at resources that we could do for the patients, expanding in the community. And I think one area that this becomes super important is as you get into any kind of scientific studies, it can start to get painful a little bit. You kind of dug into the books, you're doing exams, and it feels a little bit distant from that vision you have of being a doctor and working with patients. And I think having those opportunities, like working at the clinic and like taking ownership and being involved in that, was my way of kind of continuing to keep my passion and my joy of pursuing medicine alive.
But also, you don't get to dance in front of your class in community college as you did in Davis, right?
Yeah. I'll have to ask how you found that out.
I thought you showed me the video.
Oh, I did? Oh, okay. Yeah, so one thing I'll say before going into that is do things you enjoy. I remember thinking about everyone who is applying to medical school. When I would hear about their experiences that they're going to put on their application, it would sound so amazing and so many different experiences. And I felt like I didn't really have any. But when it came time for me to apply, I felt like I didn't have an issue. And part of it was I just did what I enjoyed. Whether it was being a part of the clinic and being able to work in Sacramento, helping with community services, or dancing salsa, which I truly enjoyed. I joined Baila de Fuego at UCDavis, which was like this amazing group of people that taught us salsa, bachata, kizomba. And we actually did some competition stuff. We also performed at different events, and that was super exciting. And it was just another way to kind of enjoy just being an undergrad student, enjoy life, but also enjoy being around a community of people that are diverse, that share kind of my goals and visions. And yeah.
We have a question from an attendee who they say that they're freshmen at their local community college and they're in a situation where their family is not going to support their decision to pursue medicine. And they're relying on them for financial support, and they're wondering if they should reconsider pursuing medicine. Do you have any do you have any thoughts to share on that, or if you know anyone who is in a similar situation?
First of all, I would say I'm really sorry to hear that, because when you found something that you're very passionate about, it's something that kind of guides your breath, kind of guides everything you do, and it's something that's very difficult to ignore, if not impossible. And so, what I would say is, without knowing your full situation, exploring why they may not be interested in that decision. Um, it can be for various reasons. At least from my perspective, I've met people who the parents weren't supportive because they were older students and they felt that going to medicine another 4 years and then residency, it would take too long, and they should be starting a family and that kind of thing. Provided one opportunity for them to be able to explain opportunities where they can have a family in medical school, which can happen, or a family in residency, which can happen. So I'd say if you can find the root of why they feel that way, and be able to offer alternatives or a different perspective, then I would try that. As far as resources available, I would say if you are able to get loans, loans are a very scary thing. Unfortunately, I had to take a lot of loans to be able to get where I am today. But I look at it as an investment in my future. So each time that I had to take the loans, and this was actually more in medical school because I had the GI Bill at the time, but each time I took a loan out, it was a view of I will be able to pay this back. But right now, it's getting me to the point where I have a career that makes me happy, that makes me wake up each morning and feel that I am fulfilled. And that to me was the most important thing. And a lot of my mentors that I've met have had that similar kind of thinking. I remember some of my strongest mentors, they were just finishing their residency and were planning on another long fellowship. And I remember asking, aren't you ready to kind of get out there and start working? And they were telling me why. I'm a doctor, I'm doing the things that I really enjoy, I'm learning, I want to learn as well as I can for my patients. And so they kind of held on to that. I'm sorry if that's not given the complete answer. But I would say, if you have a passion for medicine, it's very difficult to ignore that. And finding the resources, I think either by working with your parents to help with providing different perspectives, helping them see how much of a passion it was for you. The one story that I just thought of, I remember my parents, when I told them I was going into medicine, they were like, oh, that's great. That's great. And it wasn't until I was getting to applications, and I think part of it was they knew it would take a long time. So they were like, we'll just wait and see what happens if he changes his mind. But when I sat down with them and showed them all my applications and how well I had reviewed all these programs and these schools, and this is the type of like medicine I'm super interested in, that meeting that we had that night was super fascinating, because my parents became super involved in everything that I was doing. They were calling to check in on the programs that I had that were my number one. And so I think engaging them in the process might be helpful too, making them feel like it's not just some separate decision, but it's more than just something that you decided on a whim, or something that you just decided to pursue without caring about how it affects everyone else. I think if you involve them in it, that might help as well. So I hope that helps.
I think one of the other things, if they're not supporting you to go to school, I think that's more challenging. But if they're supporting you to go to school, is, they don't, like, your academic record is private. And so they don't know what you're studying. So you could still do that. But at some point, you kind of have to make a choice, and and it's may be very brutal, but you may have to figure out a way to separate. And I know that's hard, but you're not the first person who's going to do this alone, and you probably won't be the last one. And ultimately your happiness and your joy and what you decide to do with your life is yours. So, and I come from a culture that, is very family oriented and family, but at some point, you have to live with yourself for the next 50, 60 years. And that's totally in your power.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. It's something you're going to have to wake up with every day. And I've always said, long after my parents are gone, which many, many, many years from now, but I still have to be happy with the decisions I've made. So.
Dr. Abolarin, how am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Yeah, Abolarin, they're both fine. Yeah.
I was wondering, could you speak a little bit more about the application process and why you decided to go to University of Colorado?
Mm-hmm. So I guess based on my history, you can tell that I like moving to different states and seeing different things. So of course, the Navy had me moving different places. And that's how I got out west to see San Diego for the first time, where I fell in love with San Diego. So I'm super jealous of Lucia. But that's where I fell in love with California. I fell in love with the outdoors as far as like seeing the ocean. But when I was applying for medical school, I think I tried to keep in perspective the type of person I am. And one of the best things about applying to medical schools is the data that they have available to students. I feel like it's not as good a data later when you're applying for residency programs and things like that. So when I was applying, I definitely looked at programs that took older students because I was in my 30s. I looked at programs that were more holistic. And you have to do that because you're spending a lot of money and it costs a lot of money to apply to these different programs on top of the secondaries and things like that. So I think I made like a spreadsheet where I put down all the programs that kind of fit my criteria. I also put dream schools, of course, because you never know until you know. I sort of organized that and decided how much I could spend on my budget and then apply to those programs. One consideration that I did have was where I lived. Back then, I didn't really mind it as much. I think applying for residency, I did mind it because you tend to stay where you have your residency. But back then I felt that I was much more broad in the places I applied to medical school. But I still think it's important to keep in mind the location if you can. And part of the reason for that is medical school is tough. You're gonna be busy all the time. And when you do have an opportunity to get out, where will you go? What will you do? And that's part of the reason I really enjoyed the idea of going to Colorado, because I felt like the mountains was the best place to escape to if I was having some stress. And believe me, I had a lot of opportunities where I got to go into the mountains. That being said, I didn't hike as many 14ers as I had planned, but I definitely enjoyed going out with friends, either skiing or just hiking the mountains in the summer and taking a break out just to enjoy being present and in the moment.
And to kind of build off of that, do you have a favorite memory or favorite kind of a memory from medical school that you still look back on like fondly?
Let's see. I think my best memory was doing the longitudinal integrated clerkship. So you may have heard how third year works in traditional schools. In general, third year is where you do, let's say, 10 weeks of surgery and then 2 months of internal medicine and maybe a month of OB-GYN or something like that. The longitudinal integrated clerkship was much more of a year-long multiple experience kind of situation where I had a internal medicine physician throughout the year that I worked with at least once a week. Same with pediatrics, same with OB. And that provided me a breath of being able to enjoy seeing the ins and outs throughout the year and really feeling sure about my situation as far as what I was going to be applying to. But the other thing that I really enjoyed about it, and the main part of the program, is that they wanted you to choose patients that you would follow. And so I would meet patients, let's say in internal medicine, who I would follow and see in their surgery, and then follow them. Let's say if they had a child, I would follow them in OB. And that to me was the most amazing experience, because not only did you get to see the joy of the patients who are so used to seeing so many different teams because of how complex their disease is, seeing you show up to their clinic in different specialties and they're like, wow, Josh is here, was super amazing. But it also helped shape how I think of medicine in the future. I still today, even in my residency program, I add patients to a special list so that if they show up in the hospital again, after I've been involved in their surgery, but they show up in medicine or something like that, be able to pop down and say, how have things been since? And that has been the most fond memory. And I'm seeking up different ways to further integrate that in the future. I think it's super important, and it's a way that will kind of keep me tethered. We hear a lot about burnout and worry about, people worry about lack of empathy as you get older in your career. But I feel that joy of being able to connect with my patients and see them beyond just, I had to treat them in that moment, is going to be something that I truly get to enjoy for the rest of my career. So.
We have a question from one of the attendees, and they're wondering, what did you wish you knew before you entered medical school?
Let's see. I think the one thing I wish I knew was that it would be okay. I think I had a lot of stress, especially just being an older student. And I was one of those people who went on Reddit, which I should not have. But, you go on Reddit, you read all these things, and they're not for somebody who went into the Navy for 6 years, came back, did after a whole nother career. And so it made me really nervous. But I think if I could go back and talk to my former self, I would tell myself that it's going to be all right. You have a goal, you have a passion. Pursuing that and moving forward with that is the most important thing. And all the things that I was stressing about, as far as whether or not I would be a good doctor, whether or not, I was too old to even have a career in medicine, all of those stresses were irrelevant. It was the passion that I had, that I knew that this is what I needed. Every day I woke up with this passion. Every night I went to bed with this passion. That's why I knew I was going to make it. And so I think that's what I would hold on to, is like, if I could tell myself that, I'd be, just relax, you're going to get it.
And was there anything that you didn't expect when going into medical school or even going into your residency?
I think medical school, everyone talks about it feeling like a water hose. So you're getting so much information and you're expected to know it really fast. I think I really got that first year. And so I was surprised at how much volume of information, even though I knew it was going to be a lot. And so I had to kind of change my study habits, because in undergrad, I didn't have to do as much note taking and things like that. For me, undergrad, I was more engaged in a conversation with like the professor, and that's kind of how I learned information. In medical school, it was too much that they can fit it on their slides. So of course we had to do our own readings, and it just became super complicated. So I think, once again, relying on the things that helped in undergrad, which was having the groups that I could rely on to help me as far as teaching me, or I teach them a certain concept that was difficult. That was the one thing that truly helped me. And then the one thing I would say that I didn't expect for residency, again, was how much choice would go into the application process. I think before you get to fourth year, you'll meet a lot of people who say, I'm not really sure what I want to do, which is perfectly fine. I do think that, it does help to know in certain specialties that are much more competitive a little bit earlier on what you want to do. But during fourth year, you'll question yourself a lot. And you'll say, wow, okay, am I sure general surgery is what I want to do for the rest of my life? Or am I sure pediatrics is what I want to do for the rest of my life? And so all of my fourth year friends and a lot of fourth year med students will tell you that, especially now that they're about to submit their applications, that they're really thinking about whether or not, yes, this is truly the specialty that they want. And it's okay. It's okay to be not sure.
Kind of building on that, do you have any plans to further subspecialize, or are you hoping to stay in general surgery?
So right now my plan is trauma. I just had some very amazing trauma surgery experiences. And I feel that it's the most rewarding for me, partly because I've always wanted to be in a specialty that had a huge breadth of experiences. And so that pretty much tied me down to either internal medicine, which is, a physician that takes care of everything as far as medicine wise, and then surgery, general surgery, which they do get to do their own medicine for their patients. And I really enjoy it, but they also get to work with their hands. And so all of that came together for me to decide, is it going to be a specialty where I get to truly work with my hands all the time? Or am I going to go into internal medicine where if I do want to work with my hands, I might do like critical care or something like that. So I ended up choosing surgery because of what I mentioned before. And when I was doing all the trauma experiences at Denver Health and some of the other hospitals, that's where I really realized how much I enjoyed not really being sure what was coming into the emergency room, and enjoyed just trying to be prepared for everything. That being said, they will tell you this also in residency, is to keep your mind open as far as different specialties. For example, surgical oncology. I'm having an excellent time, great teachers here, and just great experiences. And I think it's made me question, how much do I really want to do trauma versus surgical oncology versus any of the other specialties that I still haven't experienced yet. And I think just give your time to enjoy the experience, and whatever finally lands in fifth year or whatever year you're finally ready to choose your specialty, then go for it.
Could you share some of the experiences you had in trauma surgery that drew you towards it?
Mm-hmm. I think when I think about, let's see, UCDavis, I did the pre-med surgical internship program. We had one of the trauma surgeons, and I'm sorry, Jim, and I can't remember his name right now, but I remember he came in and we asked, why did he choose trauma surgery? And I think he was saying that he enjoyed a specialty where he felt that the good and the bad kind of balanced. And he made a point of saying that there's no such thing as good if there's no bad. And when I look at the different specialties, especially in surgery, I found myself looking at outcomes and how well patients were recovering. And I think trauma was one of those places where I would see patients who maybe had a huge traumatic event, whether it was a motor vehicle accident or they fell 100 feet or something like that, where when they came in, the chances of them living seemed very low. And unfortunately, in many instances, it does happen where the patients do pass away. But sometimes there are these amazing stories of patients who go through these huge trauma events and they're in the hospital for months, but to be able to see them walk out is such an amazing experience. And I think those are the kinds of stories that I hold on to. And also at Denver Health, the opportunities where they let me take part in being in the operating room and helping with trauma cases, being involved and understanding how trauma surgery is about algorithms and about applying certain concepts made me feel a little bit more confident about being able to do trauma surgery. And so I think all of that came together, and that's why I decided that's what I want to do. But I'm sure it's not for everyone. And that's the other point I'll make. Medicine has room for anyone. You know, if you want to be a person who gets to work with patients long-term, get to know your patients really well, and serve the community in an outpatient aspect, you can do family medicine, you can do internal medicine. If you prefer, studying patient charts and images and understanding what's going on behind the scenes and then relaying that information, obviously have radiology. There's something for everyone in medicine. And you'll find that when you go to medical school, a lot of people might have come in with their initial thought about who they think they would be in the future. And most people I knew at least changed their minds by the end of medical school. So yeah.
So right now, what does a typical week look like for you with your residency program?
So right now, I would say I'm working like a 12 to 2, which is like 12 days on, 2 days off. So this is my golden weekend, which is nice. So I'm going to get out there and enjoy the sun in a little bit. But basically, I get in there early in the morning at like 4 in the morning. And that's when I get all the numbers. I start looking through patients' charts and just seeing, if I need to put in any orders, if there's any kind of emergency that I need to take care of, working with the night team to figure out what happened overnight. And then we go through the day after we do rounds in the morning. If I have a chance, I get to go into the operating room and maybe learn a few things, which is nice. And then at the end of the day, I turn over to the team. That being said, when I come home, I do try to do something for myself. And I think it's super important because you work long hours and it can be stressful a little bit. The best way I do that is either I try and find some time to go to the gym. I try and cook something from like a cooking channel or something like that, just to feel like I'm doing something for the day. I hang out with friends, and then I get my sleep in because sleep is super important. So whenever you can, get that in as well. And then obviously treasure your weekends as much as you can. So, or your days off, I should say. You don't always get weekends off.
We have an attendee who's saying, thank you for spending your golden weekend with us.
Oh, absolutely. I appreciate it. This is one of the things that helps me feel recharged. So absolutely.
I was wondering, do you have any advice for students who are getting ready to do interviews for medical school?
Yeah. One advice that really stuck with me for interviews was repeat the story several times, so much so that it doesn't have to sound scripted. And so what I did was I took all the most common questions, whether it was, name a situation of adversity and how you overcame. Why do you want to be a doctor? All of these different stories. And I would practice them over and over. I would just talk. I wouldn't write a script down and memorize it. I would just talk, review how it felt as I was discussing with myself, whether it was in front of the mirror or recording myself on the phone, and doing it over and over to the point that when I got to the interviews and they asked me the questions, which again, if you've done so many of those, it's just asked in a different way. I felt very comfortable talking about my stories in different ways, if that makes sense. And so I would say most important thing is anticipate what questions they're going to ask, and then practice your answers to that questions over and over and over. And that's the best way to kind of get prepared. And it helps too if you can get someone else to ask you those questions and kind of give that outside perspective. If you can make it more nerve-wracking for yourself. I remember having a couple of people ask their friends to ask me questions. That way it was people I didn't really know. And then I would practice with that. So I think just the more you practice, the more comfortable you are with telling your story, with giving an answer when the interviews come. And yeah. And you'll get by it, and then it'll be done. And then you'll have other interviews to worry about. So.
And was there any specific challenging or any specific challenge that you faced during your medical school applications that stands out or you could give advice on?
I think the biggest challenges was how much it cost at the time. So applying for medical school, again, is so expensive. And I remember thinking, like, how am I going to come up with money for this? And I also need to apply to a bunch of schools, not too few schools, because then I don't want to say, oh, maybe it was because I didn't apply to enough schools. And I think what I left with was, once again, making that list on Excel that had all the programs I felt at least would evaluate my application to the best of its ability, which is they did take students that were over 30 in my case. They did holistic reviews. They were programs that fit what I was looking for in a program. And I put those at the very top of my list. Of course, as I mentioned before, I had my dream schools that I put in there as well if they weren't in the previous category. And then I kind of rank ordered them and then paid as much as I could up to that point. And then I was very fortunate because when I showed my parents my application and how much I had researched these schools and why I was super interested, they helped me out. So I was able to apply to a pretty good breadth of schools. I actually don't remember how many schools now, but I was able to apply to a bunch of schools. And fortunately, I got quite a few interviews, but once Colorado said yes, I was like, I'm done with interviews, no more interviews. So.
We have a question from an attendee. What should you do during medical school to prepare for residency?
Great question. I think the most important thing is enjoying the experience where you can of being with patients, and then deciding what kind of doctor you want to be. The one thing I'll share experience in third year, when I first got to internal medicine, which was my first rotation in third year, obviously everyone's super nervous because we're thinking, wow, third year is where they're going to grade us against our classmates and give us, either honors, high pass, depending on what school you go to. And this is where you're going to be presenting on patients. You're going to own some patients that they're going to be looking to you for information. And it's also the year where you feel that you want to best present that you can be a good doctor. And there was a particular patient that I had been following who I got to know, and his family. And unfortunately, he had end-stage liver disease. And then the problem I had at the time was that my oral presentations were not up to par because it's my first third year experience. And so there were a lot of things wrong with either the information I was giving was too much or the information I was giving was too little. And so one morning I got up super early. I made sure to see the patient, see how he was doing. And then I did everything to make sure that that presentation was absolutely spotless. I worked with some of the residents beforehand. And then when we our attending at the time did bedside rounds, when we had an opportunity to present, I presented for the first time without any mistakes. had a great assessment, great plan. And then after I finished, they said, "Hey, Josh, great job." And then they sat down and talked to him about end of life care. And that was the first time that I remember thinking, wow, I kind of got so caught up in the numbers and in just making sure I presented right and in doing as best as I can, third year, to look as good as I can for whatever grade I'm getting, that I forgot to really understand what the numbers mean. And that was something that I held on to for the rest of my third year and fourth year experiences. And I think if I could pass that on to anyone, you're going to get through medical school. They're going to have all these resources that they're going to give you to make sure that you get on to the next level. And you're able to pass all your exams and you're able to study for the board exam and do well. I think the most important thing is saying, okay, what is it that I enjoyed about coming into medical school? How can I keep that going, whether it's with student groups, with community events, or just shadowing in the operating room or in the clinic, and being involved in patient care to keep that going, because there's always a temptation to, again, focus on grades. And then the last thing I'll say is thinking about the physician you want to be. And that just goes back to my third year experience in the longitudinal integrated clerkship. I spent my time understanding how important it was to see patients in different environments and to see what it was like for them to have such complex issues where they go through different specialties, different providers who don't know them, a lot of confusing information, and being able to be a resource at the time where I could say, hey, here's where your next appointment is with this other specialty. Here's what they're talking about. Here's what's going on, was absolutely amazing and has changed my outlook on the type of surgeon I want to be. I want to be a surgeon that doesn't just operate and say, okay, you're good to go. Hopefully I don't see you in the operating room again. I want to be a surgeon who, if you do come back to hospital, still be able to see how you're doing, and to make sure that you're taken care of.
And could you speak a little bit to how you utilize your communication skills in patient interactions and while working with the rest of your teams?
So University of Colorado had some of the best, at least in my opinion, amazing communication skills, both like in events or in practice, because they would hire different actors who would act as patients for us, and we would practice our communication skills. And we work on one thing at a time, so it wasn't super complex. I think part of it is innate. As you're going through, you already chose a profession where you want to be able to help people, and you desire to do that in the best way you can. And you realize that your patients are very diverse from different backgrounds and from different beliefs and sets of virtues. So you already have some of that experience, but being able to talk about a diagnosis that's very difficult with a patient is something that you can only learn by being in those situations over and over, has been something that I'm still learning today. Giving difficult news to patients is always going to be challenging. I always want it to be challenging. I think I would question the day when it became easy for me to give that kind of information. But it's something that I've only been able to learn by, practicing a little bit in medical school, but also being involved in those situations during my third year, my fourth year, when we were having family meetings and they gave me the option, hey, Josh, do you want to join? Absolutely. It was an opportunity to see how would this physician relay this cancer diagnosis to this patient, or relay that, their loved one died in a motor vehicle accident. And I became very invested in finding those experiences and being a part of them, because it gave me an opportunity to see that there's actually a lot of different ways that it can be approached with the same amount of empathy, with the same amount of care. And so if you have that opportunity, whether it's in community college, whether it's in any type of undergrad or in medical school, be as involved as you can, or as they let you in those types of conversations. And that will kind of help build your experience around it.
We have a question from an attendee. I don't know if this applies, but they're wondering if you applied to medical school as an international student. They're Nigerian, and from your last name, but they see you're Nigerian as well. And yeah, I don't know if you can answer that or if you know anyone who was an international student.
So yes, I am Nigerian. My parents are Yoruba, and they were born in Nigeria. I was born in Georgia here. That being said, even though I applied as an American graduate, I will say that I have seen quite a few international graduates. And one unique thing about at least UT Southwestern has been that I've found they do take quite a few international medical graduates. So I think only giving as much information as I can about it, it is challenging as an IMG to get into medical school or to get into programs for residency. It is a challenge. Everyone knows this. But what I can say is that there are programs willing to take IMGs. And so if you have that opportunity to research those types of programs, which you can, because they have them usually posted on their websites or some other available source of information. I believe if you look on Frida or some of the websites that list residency programs, you'll be able to kind of see if they accept students who are IMGs or have different visa needs. That's always available to you. Unfortunately, that's as much information as I can give. I know that they have those experiences. If you leave an email or you get my email, you can reach out to me and let me know, and then I can connect you with someone in our program who has had a similar experience.
And although you're not an international student, could you speak to the experiences of being part of an underrepresented group in a field that you're entering?
Mm-hmm. So I think one of the biggest challenges is questioning yourself a little bit. At least for me, I found myself always questioning my decisions. When you get to medical school, they'll all tell you that everyone comes in with this imposter syndrome, and it's true. You feel like I was lucky to get here and they just didn't figure out, or maybe when they called and said, Josh, you're in, it was the wrong Josh. And so I remember having a lot of that like internal feedback that was kind of negative, on top of the fact that there are so few Blacks and Hispanics and just underrepresented minorities in medicine in general. And I think what I had to do was, number one, find mentors. And a lot of that was why I chose a program that had a lot of diversity, because I wanted a program that already understood diversity, but also had a breadth of different mentors that I could speak to, and that could help me with those internal thoughts, and also kind of guide me to experiences that maybe I was not aware of, just because I've never grown up in a circumstance where I had those types of experiences. And so number one, mentorship. I think number two, being involved in like SNMA or any of the student groups that were available for underrepresented minorities in medicine. They also have them in medical school. So I was part of the SNMA in medical school. Was absolutely amazing because it provided me an opportunity to talk about my experiences. They could share their experiences, and we could kind of form this cohesive group that felt more empowered about our pursuit in medicine. I think if you focus so much on the numbers a little bit, for example, there's so few Black surgeons currently. And I remember looking at that and thinking, wow, this is going to be super challenging for me because I feel this pressure of going into a field where there's so few, and being able to show my skills and actually be able to succeed was very concerning to me. But very early on in second year, actually, of medical school, I reached out to all of the surgeons that I had available at Denver Health, and I found some great mentors who immediately recognized that I was a Black male individual who wants to go into surgery, and connected me with people who would help me achieve that. And I think that's where you get your strength, is by networking, by reaching out in programs that are more diverse, and by reaching out to anyone that recognizes the disparity. I hope that makes sense.
Kind of to build on that, do you have any advice for students that are older that are pursuing a career in medicine?
Similar advice: don't focus too much on your age. You know, it's a long career. It's a lifelong career. And so I remember, I'm 37 now, and just starting my surgery residency. And then, of course, if I do trauma, that's another fellowship on top of that. But going back to the advice of some of my favorite mentors, who told me, look, you're already doing what you want to do. And I think as long as you're on the path, you're doing what you want to do, you're pursuing medicine, you get into medical school, you get into residency, you're doing what you enjoy, focus on that. A lot of patients actually expect older people as their doctors. It's kind of a newer thing to see a lot of young folks around who are the residents and now full-blown attendings. And so at least lean into that, I guess, as a positive for being an older medical student. And then the other thing was, you have had a breadth of experiences that has led you to this point, and it can help you feel more sure that medicine is the career that you chose. For me, it was after I had done so many other different jobs, and then I went into the military and realized that the one thing that all the jobs that I enjoyed had in common was working with my hands and critical thinking. And so it made me much more sure that surgery was my choice in life, and I would be okay pursuing that, even though it takes longer.
And do you have any advice for students who are seeking out mentors or guidance, like you mentioned, utilizing?
Well, if I can, first of all, leave myself as a potential resource. Obviously, I'm going to leave my email available for anyone. So if you have any questions, or you want to talk or meet up sometime, probably not meet up because I'm in Texas, but on Zoom or something like that, please let me know. I think the best way to do it is to kind of find whatever mentors are available and things you enjoy. For me, it was, for example, clinic. I met a lot of the physicians that were working at the clinic in Sacramento. That was one of the UCDavis clinics, and that's where I found a mentor. I also found mentor in the pre-med office. I also found mentors in one of my teachers, actually, who taught one of the cardiology courses at UCDavis. And those became the people that I went to constantly to check in as far as my pursuit of medicine. I would let them know that, oh, applications are coming up. Here's how I'm feeling. Is there any way to make me feel better? Because I'm super nervous about this. I would go to them about the best programs that they think would fit who I am. I would ask them to look over my application and things like that. And then in medical school, it was a little bit easier, I think, just because there's so much more than just the program. Each of the hospital have a bunch of different physicians that are available that may not be a part of the actual medical school. And I would be able to reach out to them to ask for resources, to ask for help with pursuing certain aspects of medicine, and also just to check in. And I think the most important thing actually is the check-in. If you get the mentor that is able to call you or to email you and say, how have things been going? How is that issue you were struggling with last week? Those are the mentors that you really gravitate to, because you know that they're constantly keeping you in mind. And then the other situation was doing SNMA, doing SBAS, which is like a Society of Black Academic Surgeons, going to these different conferences in the specialty that I wanted to do, which is surgery. That provided another extended network of people that I could reach out to. And so I think it's more about finding what you enjoy, first of all, whatever it is. You want to go into medicine, that's great. How are the different avenues of things that you enjoy that will get you there? For example, if you enjoy going to clinics, if you enjoy working in the community, whatever it is, do that. And as you're doing that, look for people in those areas that are potential resources. Same thing when you get into medical school. You're just going to be working, look for the experience first, something that you enjoy, pursue it, and then find people who are in those experiences who have succeeded as mentors for yourself. And that's the best that I can say about that. I've just been pursuing things that I enjoy and then looking for someone successful who represents what I want to be in that realm and asking them to be my mentor.
We were wondering, did you have any research experience during your undergraduate years or in medical school?
Undergraduate, no, I did not, which I was concerned about when I was applying, because again, I was really attached to Reddit, and Reddit made it seem like if you didn't have the most perfect scores and thousands of research publications, you wouldn't get in, which is absolutely not true. I had no research experience. My first research experience was actually in medical school. And a lot of medical schools, at least that I know of, have a research experience kind of attached to them. And so in our case, we had a project. It would start off as a project, but at the end of our 4 years, we had to have this, either a presentation or something about that research by the time we graduated. And they would check in each year to make sure we were kind of keeping up with things. But that's kind of where I found my passion. I started getting really interested in trauma outcomes in the underserved communities. And so that started guiding my choice as far as research projects. And I hope to take part in more research during residency. Right now, I'm just adjusting to residency, but we'll see what happens in the coming years.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you feel that your other extracurriculars or engagements during your undergrad years helped you prepare for medical school, even though you didn't do
it? I think the way it helps prepare is a reminder that even as you're pursuing this career that's going to take a while, you still have to live your life. And there's a famous quote that says it's not the years in your life, it's the life in your years. And I think by just pursuing what I enjoyed, which happened to actually include a lot of medicine, but some of it was not. By pursuing the things I enjoyed, I was able to both enjoy my life, get that relaxation from the stressful studying in school, which helped me coincidentally do better in school, helped me feel further engaged. And then by the time applications showed up and they asked, oh, what experiences have you done? After like calming down from the idea that, wow, I haven't really done anything, and realizing, wow, there's all these things that I did purely because I was just enjoying my life, enjoying the experience of pursuing medicine, and being able to list that down was excellent. So I'd say, on one hand, yes, you do have to, pursue medicine with this clear goal and this clear insight into what you want to do. And yes, you have to get some of these check boxes filled out, but at the same time, never forget that it should be along the lines of things that you enjoy in life, because it's a long career and there's no reason to be burnt out before you even get into residency. So do what you enjoy, and you'll find at the end that it's working out. That's how I feel.
And now in residency, how much of your day do you feel is committed to working with patients or operating versus doing administrative work?
I would say it's a little bit more on the administrative work. As an intern, a lot of your job is going to be getting notes done, making sure that you're answering all the pages that come in for new consults or new patients that are in need of either being a part of our surgical oncology patient group or not. And a lot of that is just also trying to figure out exactly how to learn to be an intern in each specialty, which changes every month. And so a lot of your time is unfortunately going to be spent just figuring things out. But I do have the experiences, thankfully, and I'm grateful that this program allows it, a lot of experiences to operate, which is what I want to do. And so that's given me chances to see the patients who I usually get to what we call pre-op, which is I see how they're doing before their operation, make sure nothing has changed since their last clinic visit, all of those good things. And then go into the operating room with them and then get to see them as they recover. And that provides that continuity, sort of like during the third year experience that I had, for them to be like, oh, you were in my surgery and I talked to you before and like, I'm doing great. Thank you so much. And all this good stuff. And so I think I rely on being able to talk to patients during those times, whether it's before operation that I get to take part of, whether it's after the operation. Sometimes I'll do my notes, for example, on the floors where I'll be able to just pop into a patient room every once in a while, see how they're doing. And that kind of gives me the opportunity to escape from the paperwork that I have to do. But paperwork is obviously important. It's very challenging when you have a patient that comes from, let's say, out of state, and you have no records available, and you're trying to piece together their history. And so being able to do that paperwork in a way that helps either our team or also helps their primary care physician, for example, to let the primary care physician know, hi, this person was here for surgery. They're doing better now. These are the things that they were concerned about. Can you make sure to mention that in their next visit with you? Honestly, those things make me feel much more happy about my job, because I'm always concerned about patients who kind of unfortunately drop off if there's no continuity of care.
On a slightly different note, how would you, or can you speak about like work-life balance and maintaining that during residency, but also when you're thinking about going into like surgery, which is a very intense career, specialty?
I think work-life balance is something you have to be very intentional about. I can either go to work, come back with just enough time to sleep basically and eat, and do that all day and never really feel like I'm having the joy that I do when I come out of work. Or I can find little things that I can do, whether it's go out with a friend to dinner. Unfortunately, it might be a short dinner, but we're able to communicate, we're able to talk, we're able to catch up. I have to be very intentional about that. And I think, it does improve a little bit later on as I get better at understanding the flow of things. A lot of it is what we just talked about, where I'm going to a new hospital each time or a new team each month. And so I'm figuring out what's going on and adjusting to that new system. But again, I'm always intentional, knowing that I have to do the things that I enjoy in order to feel like I'm accomplishing my life as well. Time is still going while I'm pursuing my career and this eventual goal of being an attending in the specialty. And so I can either let all this time just pass me by where I'm only doing medicine in the specialty, or I'm also still engaged with my friends, engaged with my family. If you have relationships or anything that you're doing on as well, being able to build that up is something that I find crucial, because again, it's the life in your years. And so fill it up with life as much as you can.
And do you feel that being in medicine has changed you in any way?
In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. I think it's hard for me to quantify how much it has changed me. I've become more cognizant of how medicine operates, and medicine, unfortunately, is run as it's still a business, and you see a lot of the things that happen as far as whether it's politics or whatever it is, as far as what you can provide for your patients. And I think that part of it has just invigorated me more to be an advocate for my patients. I found myself really thinking about how am I going to guide my practice wherever I choose to in the future. I know I want to work in the urban underserved community, but where is it that I can have the most impact, the most change for healthcare policy, for building the health in a community that suffers from a particular disease or a particular poor outcome. And I think the best way that I can do that is by either taking part in research while I'm here in residency that helps me study that more. And then that will guide my thought as far as where I choose to go in the future, or being a mentor right now to students, which I currently am. I've been able to help some students as far as applying to residency programs, going through some of the challenges I went through. And I'm grateful for that experience because I had mentors who got me to this point. And so that's kind of where I find my joy, I guess.
Do you have advice for students who are interested in serving underrepresented or underserved communities in medicine and how to get there?
I think you have a lot of experiences available to you, and being able to seek those out is very important because, again, as you go into medical school, you're going to be busy trying to make sure that you do well on all your exams. You do well during third and fourth year when you're trying to get letters of recommendation and all these different things. But being able to remember your passion for working with the underserved is the more difficult aspect. Most programs, at least that I know of, will have opportunities where you can be engaged in the community in that aspect, but it's difficult to find the time to make that happen, and it's difficult to keep that motivation to take the time, your limited free time, to go do that. And so the way that I was able to enjoy working in the community during medical school was I took part in this urban underserved track in our medical school, which had members of the community, whether it was the LGBTQ plus community, whether it was the homeless community, whether it was, the immigrant community, whichever community, they were able to come and talk to us about their experiences, both in medicine and in just social situations that they've had to deal with. And we would discuss ways that we would challenge that going into our careers. And that was kind of my way of maintaining my joy for both serving the underserved communities, but also thinking of the most important aspect of how am I going to be a physician in that community? Because once you get into medical school, as I said, there's so many resources to make sure that you get where you need to go. And so the question changes from, I guess, in undergrad when you're applying to medical school, can I be a doctor, to more, what kind of physician will I be?
And then could you speak a little bit about what your future career goals are and where you want your practice to go to?
So while I'm still thinking about the different specialties that I could take part in, I am thinking that, yes, I do want to work in the urban underserved in a large city. I grew up in Atlanta. I love San Francisco. I love Chicago. I love LA. And so I see myself being in a large community where there's a lot of diversity and a lot of opportunities for me to research outcomes in the urban underserved community in my field, whether it is trauma surgery or surgical oncology or whatever I decide to do. And then the other thing is I'm very interested in working with um, um, high school students in those communities as well, because growing up in Atlanta, I didn't really see a lot of examples of Black physicians. Even though they were around, it's just not as common. And so I remember missing out on that, I feel, prevented me from being able to see myself as a doctor one day. I did have the advantage that my mom was a registered nurse, but I still didn't see myself being a doctor. And even when I started pursuing medical school, I was a little hesitant to the fact that I would be able to accomplish it. And so I would look for opportunities to be able to open that up for students, to be to show them that we need more Black, Hispanic, Asian representation in STEM, not just medicine, but in any kind of scientific field. And then the last thing that I would like to do is be an advocate for change in medicine. While I'm still learning a lot about how medicine runs and how it works, and unfortunately how money is involved in that process, I'm realizing that as I'm building my experience now, I can decide what are the issues that I need to bring to the forefront for my patients to make sure they get the resources they need. And so I see myself again in that kind of community where I'm able to have a voice, collect the voices of my patients in those communities, and then hopefully bring it before, whether it's the state government or whatever avenue I need to pursue to make sure that changes are available. And so.
Kind of going off of that, how do you deal with frustrations that you have, like working within the healthcare system and knowing that you'll have to deal with that going forward?
It's a great question. I think recognizing it and talking about it is super important. You always have these situations happen, and it's easy to kind of throw it up that, hey, this is the way the system is. But for me, I've tried to reflect on whether or not, okay, I'm disappointed that the system is preventing my patient from being able to have access to this resource because they have this type of insurance. And I usually either talk to, people I've gotten close to on my team, or I talk to some of my mentors about that experience. And it's great to hear sometimes other sides of the argument to be able to help me understand that it's not just that small issue that I saw, how big the actual issue is, how complex it is. But if you're able to talk about it, you're able to keep that perspective going, you're able to challenge it by just talking with people who are your mentors or your coworkers, that hopefully I feel will build up my skills when I do become an advocate in the community and I have much more of a voice to be able to answer the issues fully and to be able to show that this is the breadth of experience I've had. I understand the other side arguments, but here are mine, and here's how I challenge that. And so that's kind of how I approach that.
And then what was the biggest challenge that you faced during medical school or residency?
Mm-hmm. I think the imposter syndrome, everyone feels that, but we always have this tendency, especially those who want to go into medicine, to be really hard on ourselves and to think we're the only ones who are not doing well, or we're the only ones who are facing these challenges. And so it was real easy for me to feel the imposter syndrome, like, wow, I can't believe I'm here. And like, everyone's so much faster at getting concepts than me. And everyone's doing so well on their presentation during third year. And the best thing that we did was we had constant check-ins throughout, for example, third year, where we had our clinical experiences, where we would just talk to each other with no faculty present. And I love that, because then I would hear my friends explain their thoughts the same as my own, the same fears, the same challenges. And it made me realize that I was not, suffering alone or in silence. So I would say, whenever you have those thoughts, and they're going to come, being able to acknowledge them, and then being able to reach out and talk to people, realizing that others are also going to have that experience. Others are feeling the same sense of fear that maybe they're not going to be able to make it through. Maybe they're in over their heads or whatever it is. The only way that that can get better is by talking about it, I feel like. And that's what helped me.
And did you ever face or have to deal with doubts as you went, even when you were already in medical school or entering residency?
Mm-hmm. So the doubts are always there, and they're just different. Before medical school, it was doubt that I would get into medical school. And then in medical school, it was like doubt that I would even make a good doctor, and that I would understand things as well as my colleagues and all of that. And then third year, when I was like, wow, I'm about to apply for surgery, or at the end of third year, I'm about to apply for surgery. Now it was doubt about whether or not I'd be able to get into surgery, and whether or not I'd be able to cut it as a surgical resident. So I think accepting the fact that doubts are going to come, it's just, thoughts that immediately happen, acknowledging it, and kind of going back to my point before of being able to talk with friends, with family, with other people who are having the same fears and doubts you are in your field, or the field you choose to pursue, is super important. And it's the same thing now. It hasn't really changed from undergrad to residency. We have a bunch of interns. We're all freaked out. We feel like, wow, this is very confusing. So much I have to learn. And am I even doing a great job? And we check in with each other, and we realize that we all have the same challenges, and we're going through the same experiences that those before us are going through. And many of them will tell you that. They'll say, this is exactly how I was when I got out of medical school. I was afraid to order Tylenol, and it's the same fear that you have. So you kind of have to trust the system a little bit, that yes, you will learn the process. Just go through it and do the best you can.
And then a lot of our attendees are still in community colleges and getting ready to transfer. Going way back in time, could you speak a little bit about your experience transferring to university, and just how you prepared for that transition?
Mm-hmm. So I think I was fortunate, because I did the pre-med surgical internship program just before going into Davis. But the other thing that I think really helped me was the fact that in my community college, I had a lot of friends who were also going to Davis. And so it just worked out that a lot of us who were doing pre-med courses, when I got to Davis, we were still in these courses. So I was very fortunate in that aspect. That being said, when you're applying to a four-year university, obviously it's challenging in the aspect that it's huge. It feels like it's not as personal. I loved my community college training, because I felt like my general science teachers knew me. And then I jumped to this huge class of 500, 700 people. And it's like, how am I going to get to know my professor that well anyway? And the best way to handle that is by having the small communities that you can join that have the same goals and passions that you do, whether it's SNMA, whether it's MAPS, whatever it is. Being able to join these communities is the best way to kind of have that small, tight-knit family that provides the support that you need to be able to face the challenges for a larger school. As far as applying to different schools, Honestly, I applied broadly. At the time, I wanted to go to Berkeley because that was a school I had heard of. And so that's part of the reason I went to East Bay to do my community college. But then I found out about Davis and I was like, wow, Davis seems to fit a lot more of my goals. And so I ended up applying there and very grateful that I got in. A lot of it was just explaining my experience, explaining why I wanted to choose, I think it was neurobiology. It was MPB at the time. I wasn't sure if I chose a different specialty before I changed to that, but explaining why I wanted to get that degree, what I thought I would get out of that degree, and that was it. So it's a little bit different for me just because, you know, much older student coming back and applying for school was very regimented for me. I don't know. It wasn't like I was applying to so many schools in all of California, hoping to get into one. I ended up just applying to a few and I was fortunate.
So we're running up on time here, but I wanted to ask if you had any last pieces of advice for the attendees, or if the attendees had any last minute questions they wanted to put in the Q&A.
One thing I would like to say is, you know, I remember thinking to myself that it's not if I would get into medical school, it's when. And when, as in when I'm ready, when do I feel that I've gotten all the things I needed? And it's okay that if it's a circuitous path, if it takes you a while to get there. The point is, if it's your goal, pursuing it and pursuing it with vigor, finding the resources that you need, doing as best as you can. I feel that getting into medical school is possible for anyone. It's just having to be able to deal with the challenges along the way. I didn't get in the first time I applied again. And I already knew that if I didn't get in, I was just going to do more courses and apply again, even at my age. And so I always thought of it as not a question of if I will get in, it's just when.
Well, it doesn't look, I don't know, I can't see any questions. Did you get any, Madeline?
No, it looks like we're all finishing up. Thank you so much for spending your golden weekend with us today.
Thank you all so much for having me, and I really appreciate it. I hope I was able to give some information out. If not, I will provide my email and it will be available, or my number. Feel free to reach out, and yeah, I'll help the best I can.
Thank you so much. We have some comments in the Q&A coming in saying that your speak was very encouraging, and people really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you all.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone, we're going to leave it open just for a little bit longer. And thank you very much for joining us today.